Time for another video. This one's going to be about to get the most we can out of our battery bank here. Now, I was talking about balancing, you always hear me saying. So you can imagine the top row runs independently to the bottom row. As far as it sees, the system says the top as one big bank to the bottom as another big bank, and then parallel that, like having two 12-volt batteries together. So as you're probably aware, if you're doing a bit of research in the past or you're new, I'll try and explain it. If each bank is one big battery in parallel connected in series to another big bank and so on and so forth. Now what we do, preferably top end balance, although I'm balancing mine at 4.1 volts per bank. So if the banks do vary when it discharges, one can drop further than the other. So if you notice, Peter did do this and he beat me to it, but I want to take it one step further. If one is dropping further than the others, it's going to let this set down, which in turn will flip back to the grid with these inverters or cut off completely. So the plan is I'll parallel bank 1 to bank 1, bank 2 to bank 2, and so on. And the theory there is you have one big battery instead of two sets of smaller ones. And if the battery drops low, argument's sake, in bank 1, but it's still good in bank 1 of the second set, it will balance that out. So you should be able to get more out of your whole pack. But where I'll take it one step further is I'm going to charge the batteries up to 4.1 volts each, which is 57.4 volt. And I'm just going to turn off solar, run it next day, whatever it takes, and take the reading at when the power wall hits one of these banks to get 3 volts first. And then from that, I'll take the reading on all the banks and see which is the weakest and the strongest. So if I have to, I can, for argument's sake, let's say this is a weak on bank 2, and that's a weak on bank 2. These are the strong ones on bank 4. What I can do is I can swap bank 2 around with bank 4 on the top or the bottom, it doesn't matter. And that way they'll bring up that a little bit higher for its balancing. So the theory is, instead of it running all the way down to bank 2 gets 3 volts and the rest about 3.3, you swap that over with one weak, one strong, it will allow you to go another 0.15 volts, or roughly what it is, further. In turn, get more out of your set. So I'll try to explain it after the results come in. Now, like I said, I've balanced mine at 4.1 for headroom, and I will keep it there for good, because if one of these banks are slightly higher on top end balance, it's still within that 4.2. Anyway, so after today's sun goes down, I'm going to deplete my banks until one of those banks, the first one, hits 3 volt. Then I'll make the reading of what the overall voltage across all that is, and we'll go from there. Ideally, you want to reach 42 volts. It's 3 volts per bank over the 14 banks. For the cabling, I've chosen 14 gauge wire. It's about 15 amps. 5mm heat shrink, which hopefully shrinks down enough to grab, and these little brass battery terminal eyelet thingies. They can easily just clip over the bolts and then screw into the bolt. Now I've chosen 14 gauge, it's about 15 amps it can handle. Ideally you want to go as high as you can, but cost is also a factor. So it shouldn't be transferring much current, so that should be far more than enough I need for thickness. But anyway, the plan is obviously put it together like so, and heat shrink just to tidy it up on the end there. Let's make some of these cables up. First one done, and the other end. So I've made the distance. Make the distance to grab the first bolt up the top, and the bolt down the bottom, and just push it back in the center to the back wall there to give a bit of slack. So that's the first distance. So when I got the distance I wanted, I just keep one aside and use that as my stencil to make the length for the next ones, keep it the same. So as I was saying, that one's done, so that's 1 of 13. Okay, got all my wires done, all my connecting wires, 13 of them, and obviously the ends become the other side of those packs already connected via one set to the other. I run my test, tried to keep the weakest bank down to 3 volt, and even 150 watt draw, it would keep bouncing back over 45 minutes to 3.15 volt on the weakest. So I did the measurements at 160 watt draw, and what I've come up with is, so these were the results of the test. This is set 1, that's set 2, and the lowest was 2.88 volts, and obviously they're just each bank, each voltage. And what I've done here is the difference is 0.67 of a volt, more than half a volt difference. At 2.88 the lowest, 3.55 the highest, and that no surprising because this half of this set was the last half I made to try and match this. So what I'll do is if I run bank 1 parallel to each other, bank 2 to parallel, it'll bring up to 160p. So then I only have 14 packs all up in one set. So if I just parallel bank 1 to bank 1, bank 2 to bank 2, make that 14S one set only for 160p. That'll bring down the difference to 0.445 of a volt, with the lowest being 3.2 and the highest 3.465. So I've already, that is better, just merely parallel what's there. But what I'll do is I'll swap around bank 2 with bank 10 and bank 5 with bank 12. So that'll make my new averages down here, where the lowest then would be 3.12, but the highest still 3.65, with the difference now a little bit better at 0.345 of a volt. So essentially what I'm saying is, if I just parallel them without swapping any packs around, it's going to go from 0.67 difference between the highest and the lowest to 0.45. But then if I swap them around to try and equalize it, make it more better, more closer, so it's effectively going to be 3.45 is half of the difference. So in turn, that would push another 1.68 volts down to bring the lowest bank to 3 volts. And therefore, in theory, I should be able to set the inverter at 44.52 volts. So I'll just go 45. I had it at 47. That would have been what it was if the lowest was at 3 volt. But now I can go down to 45. So that's the theory. It's just trying to get the most out of your power wall. Just swapping around. Okay, all hooked up now. So the cable length I chose was the eyelet hooking onto there, down to the next one down, with it pushed back at the wall halfway. So when I put the wire in, it will naturally want to sit back against the wall so it doesn't pop out forward like, see, look at that, holds well. Well, there you have it, all done. So effectively what I've done is, I've gone from a 14S 80p 2 sets to a 14S 160p 1 set. And by swapping packs around, I'm basically taking and pairing up the weakest pack with the strongest pack to give it a little bit more room in the bottom and balance. So that's effectively what I've done. Now it's going to probably take a couple of days for one set to balance into the next before it comes truly a 160p. So I'll keep an eye on it over the time, but I should be now able to drop my bottom end disconnect at 45 volts for one of these to be no less than 3 volts. let's see how it goes over the next few days, but effectively it's up and running now. Thanks again for tuning in. If what you've seen has helped, please consider subscribing. Otherwise, if you're still lost with what I did, drop some comments and I'll see if I can try and clarify it again. Thank you again. Bye.